like we're live. Okay, we're now live. Firstly, I think we've got people coming through. Yep, there we go. Everyone, thanks very much for being on this call. My name's Chris Douglas, Chad Councilman, top left there. Chad, how you going? We've been running these podcasts now. I think this is our 15th podcast, and we've been having some really good engagement from the industry, both locally here in Australia and New Zealand, but also abroad through the UK and the US, and in fact places like the Netherlands and Spain and Malaysia and Japan as well. So it's been really good. Today's a really important session that we're going to be holding. Because we've got a group of vehicle manufacturers that have agreed to come on the call, talking about recalls, talking about Takata. Obviously, it's very topical, and talking about how the automotive recycling industry, as well as the vehicle manufacturing industry, if you like, we're all in the automotive industry, can work closer to achieve a better outcome for everyone involved when it comes to recalls. And potentially other areas of interaction. So we've got AUDI, we've got Jerome FIAT. Jerome, thanks for joining. We have Murray Finlay from FCA. Murray. Derek McCarthy from SUBARU Australia. Hey, Derek. Shane from MAZDA. Hey, Shane.
Good morning, all.
And Matt from JAGUAR Land Rover.
Morning, guys.
Hey, Matt. So you would have, those that attended the 2018, I believe, Auto Recyclers Conference would have recognised Shane and Jerome attending that session. We had a panel discussion there. So we're going back a few years now where we've been working closely with vehicle manufacturers to sort of help deal with and build a better relationship so that we can start interacting more and interacting better. So that's been great, but we've got a long way to go. So what I thought we'd do is go a round table and sort of ask each of the vehicle manufacturers that are being represented here today to tell us a little bit about, I suppose, what they're looking to achieve, why they're on this call, and what things look like from a Takata perspective over the next 4 months for each of them, how they can help the recycling industry, how the recycling industry can help them, and look at what we can do moving forward beyond Takata. So I suppose maybe I'll start with Derek. You're in the middle of the screen, on my screen at least, so I'll throw you into the fire. Can you tell us a little bit from a SUBARU Australia perspective, a little bit about where you're at and what Takata looks like and beyond?
Sure. Thank you, Chris and Chad, and for everyone else who've joined us today. I'm going to keep it really simple. We've been working with Takata for the last nearly 2 years now, and it's been a difficult road for everybody, and nothing's been seen like this across the world as far as a recall. It's a landmark. But really briefly, I just want to say that we've been working very closely with Chris and now Chad to try and get as many of these airbags off the road and out of vehicles, but also trace down in salvage yards, which is where everyone else comes in here now. So our primary goal is to keep these away from vehicles that could be used and could be an accident and therefore hurt someone. So first and foremost, the most important thing, which has been harped over and over again, but unfortunately it's the most crucial part, is these things are dangerous and we need to get them off the road. So one thing I found from our point of view as we continue to do quarterly audits is we need to trace all of them down, not just the ones that are in cars, but the ones that were in cars and are lying around on shelves waiting to be sold, or ones that were in vehicles that are being crushed or waiting to be crushed. And we have to account for all of them, not just some of them and hope for the best, and that's near enough is good enough. We actually have to find all of them. So it's become really apparent how crucial working with salvage yards to ensure that we make sure that they've cleared their stock and ticked their boxes and said, all right, we've done all that we can, so that when we get audited, when each of the manufacturers get audited, when salvage yards get audited, they can say we've done everything we can do to make sure that none of these ever come in any car ever again. And firsthand, I've seen so many of these secondhand ATAIs in vehicles coming into our dealerships and being pulled out which means they're out there. We just got to find them. So it's, for us, we've got to find out ones that have been crushed, ones that have been exported, ones that have been pulled and sitting on shelves. And the most important thing is ones that have been sold to customers who have got them in cars and we can't trace them because we don't know where they are. So we need your help in salvage land. And I've learned a lot from these guys about how difficult the situation is and the way that your businesses work. I've learned a lot about salvage in the last year. But we need to help each other to get you guys into the right column as far as compliant, and to help us to get these across the lines so that ACCC can tick all the boxes and say we've done everything we can do. So we need your help, and I know that you need our help as manufacturers to get these across the line.
Perfect. Thanks, Derek. Appreciate that. Jerome, let me throw over to you.
Good morning, everyone. And again, thanks for the invitation to this podcast. As you mentioned, I came to the Auto Recyclers last year. I think it's already more than a year ago. And to me, that brought in a fair bit of knowledge, and that's something that we don't probably have as a manufacturer, and helped us understand what's in the other side and looking at the Auto Recycler. So for us, yes, we've been involved in the Takata now. It's 18 months, and we're still going. We still have 4 months to go, and that's where, for us, the important part is the safety and the security of our customers is our first priority. And therefore, that's why we need to work with you in having the same goal and trying to work on the safety of our customers. Now, we should all work together towards this goal, and that's the important part here. And I think I can refrain again what Derek said. It's for us important that you work with Auto Recall. We've been working with Chris and the team now for 18 months, and we know that there is still in the recycling industry some airbags for Audi vehicles that are still there. And for us, we want to get every single one of them, because again, we don't want any of them back on the road. We want to get them all out because it's important for the safety of our customers. Looking even further now than the Takata airbag, I think in the future we really need to work together on all recall, because whilst the Takata is a mandatory recall that's been put to us by the ACCC, it's something that we need to look at as further recall. How can we work better together so you don't sell parts that are affected by recall? And that's one thing that we're working with Chris and his team at the moment in saying, hey, we can give you the VIN that are affected by recall, and maybe you can pass that on into the recycling industry, because we don't want you to sell any of those parts. So it's quite important moving away from the Takata in thinking about the future. And another thing too, and as you can see behind me, there's the new e-tron. This month, we're launching the first battery electric vehicle for Audi. So there will be the e-tron SUV and Sportback that will be launched this month. But again, that's a new territory for all of us. I know that some of you have been working already with electric vehicles, but with the high voltage, it's something that we really need to understand, and we really need to have everyone understand that they are not the normal cars that we've been dealing with in the past. They are new vehicles, they are high voltage, and there's a danger that comes with it. So there is a specific requirement for those vehicles, and there's a way to handle those cars for the first tag when they're going to join the car, for the towing company, but also for the auto recycler. So that's probably one thing that we need to think about in the future, is how we're going to move forward with many companies now launching electric vehicles.
Yeah, thanks, Jerome. I think there's a few really good points there, and I don't want to take away from the Takata discussion, but certainly I think there's a couple of things there that I'd like to pick up on. You talk about electric vehicles, you talk about the way they need to be handled, firstly, safely. You talk about, how dangerous goods / hazardous, goods, the different sort of chemicals, etc., in those types of equipment. There is an opportunity, I think, for all of the industry and sort of to create an ecosystem within which we could together share more information and help everyone, achieve the best possible outcome, both from a safety and environmental, but also commercial, benefit as well. One of the things that I often sort of talk about with the work that I do with different insurers, and especially currently in the UK that I'm working with eBay and a number of different insurers there, we're looking at some of the data around vehicle repairability, and we're seeing some vehicles being total lost with very little damage. So I'd like the automotive recyclers to think broadly, but also the vehicle manufacturers, about is it really, or the question I suppose I pose is it really are we really competitors, or are we complementary industries, right? And traditionally, it's probably been a competitive thing. But I'm going to throw it out there, and maybe it's a little bit challenging at times to sort of, I suppose, challenge the status quo. But I think there's a great opportunity for vehicle repairability to be enhanced and more vehicles to be repaired rather than total loss by getting a better mix of product on the vehicles. And that could include some of these sensors or electronic components that are tested and provided through the auto recycling industry, which traditionally would be seen as, hold on, you're taking sales away from us. They're our parts, they're sales from the manufacturer. But my view is a total loss vehicle is no sales for anyone. So if we can increase repairability of parts of vehicles by 5 percentage points, which actually is ultimately 25% better than what it is today. If you look at, total loss ratios being circa 20%, if we reduce it by 5 points down to 15%, it's 25% more cars being repaired. I think at the end of the day, everyone wins out of that. So I know it's going off a little bit, but it's an important point, especially in the context of, the e-tron and other electric vehicles being released in the market, expensive technological components that are going to need to be used. So I think that's a really important point. The other thing you mentioned there, Jerome, is how we can work together to better trace product. And I'll revert to Chad in a minute to talk a little bit about traceability and how we can work on that. So thanks for the update there. Matt, can I hand over to Jaguar Land Rover and tell us a little bit about your brands and where you're at and what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, most definitely. I think the basis of us, I'd like to reiterate that the basis of what we want is our consumer safety. We're coming to the pointy end of this Takata recall now, and like all other manufacturers, we're really trying our best to narrow down and track down those last remaining airbags, whether they still be within customer hands or within the recyclers. We need to work together to ensure that we have 100% complicity and ensuring that our consumers are safe and able to operate a motor vehicle day to day without any fear of a dangerous situation should they be in an accident. So we've been working with you for 18 months, much like Subaru and Audi, and we're really down at the pointy end now, and it's down to the difficult part. And there are a few little airbags out there that have just slipped the net, which is where we all need to work together to make sure that we get these off the market and appropriately destroyed. So we do have that consumer safety. I'd just like to reiterate with Jerome's e-tron that's been launched, Jaguar Land Rover obviously has the Jaguar I-Pace as well, talking electric vehicles. That's been out on the market for quite a period of time now. And I think, again, working with these recyclers and our first responders in promoting the idea of safety behind high voltage components, how to appropriately disassemble or destruct these vehicles is going to be a benefit of everyone. I think from a Jaguar Land Rover perspective, we deal highly within safety, and if there's any information or any collusion that we can come to disseminate this information to the wider network, that's where we'll be aiming. We want everyone to be on board, and again, as you mentioned, if we can repair these vehicles rather than write them off, then that's a win-win for everyone.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Murray, over to Murray from Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, including Dodge, Jeep, and I think Chrysler. Dodge, Jeep, and Chrysler are affected by Takata?
Not Dodge, just Jeep Wranglers and Chrysler 300s.
Okay.
So fortunately, it's just the two brands. I'm filling in here for our recall manager, Luis Gonzalez. I'm part of the team that's actually at the front line, trying to work the phones, trying to convince people to get their vehicles repaired. So I don't have the same overview that the other gentlemen have by any means of the big picture for recalls, and certainly have no knowledge of the Fiat Chrysler's electric vehicle plans. So I can't speak for that, but as the grunt on the front line, I'm certainly relying on Chris and his team to try and track down cars. We have as Matt just said, we're at the pointy end, and we've got quite a number of customers who just will not talk to us, or give us, if they do talk to us, they give us 2-word answers. One starting with F and the other with O. And so we're often, the best we've got is just trying to give Chris a VIN to say, look, can you please see what you can find in the network to find this one, because we've been told it's written off, but the customer won't give us any information, nothing to verify it. So we're relying on the recovery side of the industry to help us out with that. And that's proving critical for us, I think, at this stage. As I say, we're down, I think, to about the last 10% of airbags that need to be found. And it's proving quite difficult with just a few months to go.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Murray. I appreciate that. And I think one of the things we just engaged from an all auto recalls perspective with Fiat Chrysler probably about 4 weeks ago. We're now in a position where we've been able to sort of find and in the process of putting together all the paperwork and returning airbags, etc., to Fiat Chrysler. Over 500, in the context of Fiat Chrysler, it's actually not a bad chunk of airbags, especially if you think about it, as the last 10%. So that's been a really good result. And yes, keep that information coming through to us, Murray. We're on the phones as soon as that comes through. And we've been able to sort of achieve a result with a few of those, although we get similar 2-word responses from some people as well. But anyway, better us than you, I suppose. Okay, Shane, last but certainly not least.
Thank you, Chris. First of all, I'd just like to echo the comments of my colleagues and thanks to the industry for the support that we've received. Being our first engagement with the wrecking recycling industry at a broad level, the response has been amazing. And for our brand particularly, we've had a really strong result through the program, with many airbags returned. And if we weren't able to get the return, we've at least been able to get some understanding that a vehicle or a VIN has been through a recycling process, which gives us more confidence that the airbag doesn't remain out there in the public and presenting a potential risk to a consumer. And as some of our other colleagues have mentioned, it's an unknowing consumer in many cases, because it may have been transferred to a VIN that's either previously been repaired or was not originally included in the recall, so is completely removed from any of the communication cycles because of that lack of awareness or understanding that the vehicle could potentially be affected by this particular campaign. So as I say, for us, it's been an amazing result. We've still got some work to do. We started with more than 292,000 VINs included in the campaign, some of which had 2 affected inflators, some only 1. And the complexity of the campaign means that for us, the vehicle pool ranges from 2003 to 2014. So the age of the vehicle has certainly presented some additional challenges that the industry as a whole has certainly come up with some innovative solutions to try and overcome, so that we can make sure that we reach out and capture all these vehicles. So great result overall, and certainly, again, thanks to everyone involved. Now, the gap that this program has helped filled with us for MAZDA in particular is the unknown for a vehicle once it leaves the registered car park. So I'm sure most of you are aware that while a vehicle remains registered, we do have the ability to try and contact consumers based on their latest registration information, understanding that there might be some gaps there, but it's by and large, it's a relatively reliable system. But as soon as the vehicle is unregistered, then that's when the visibility of that VIN or that individual vehicle becomes a lot more difficult. And in many of these transactions for vehicles that have either been damaged or just fallen unregistered due to age, means that they're not going into any formal recycling system. And understanding that the recycling sector in itself is very wide and varied in the level of professionalism that exists. So we've got the extremes from the people that are probably on the call today, down to those that are only dismantling 1 or 2 vehicles a year with very little transparency on the activity. So there's certainly some gaps that we'd be happy to engage to try and close. and with an understanding that an end-of-life program would certainly be a reasonable goal for everyone to try and work towards, and the benefits for both parties, I think, would be quite large. So for us to understand that a vehicle is no longer part of a usable car park, there's certainly some advantage in that. And for the wrecking and recycling industry, I think being able to have a more formal process around that, to be able to direct what is the next step once the vehicle leaves the road, would probably help to filter more vehicles through the process as well, and make sure that they are disposed of and recycled correctly.
Yeah.
Very similar to the other brands. Our technology roadmap probably looks a little bit different to Jaguar and to the Audi experience, where we currently don't have a battery EV in the market. Other markets, they're certainly being released, but not in our market yet. But it does introduce new technologies and new risks, not only to the network, but also to recycling. So understanding what's required to correctly and safely dismantle a vehicle is certainly part of our planning. We certainly seek to ensure that everyone that touches that vehicle remains safe and is not injured as a result of any activity that they need to do. So certainly keen to be part of that sharing of information, so that we can, again, make sure that all the people that touch a Mazda vehicle can do it in a safe and reliable way.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks, Shane. I really appreciate that. I think excellent insights from everyone, really, around excuse me, where you're at today, what you want to achieve, and I suppose comforting for the automotive recycling industry. I think we should be embracing that. If I can put an automotive recycler's hat on, we need to embrace the fact that we've got, representatives from 8 different brands on a call here today, and Nissan, Volkswagen, and SKODA were unavailable for this call, but would have loved to be on it as well. So I think there's representatives from 11 or 12 different brands that we're working with, that we should be embracing the opportunity to work with them. And I think, obviously time is and priorities are critical here. But I think one of the things that we'd all like is to get more information from the vehicle manufacturers. Just on electric vehicles, for example, I know that the automotive recycling industry has had, and Chad, through his association with the Auto Recyclers Association in the US and his presidency there, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the fragmented, if you like, approach that automotive recyclers have had to take to acquiring some of this information, Chad, like electric vehicle dismantling processes and all that type of stuff. It's available, but it has to come together. It's a jigsaw puzzle. So maybe you want to expand on a little bit of that, Chad?
Yeah, that's definitely been a challenge over the years in the US. And from what I've seen so far, 6 months into Australia's market, same thing here, getting some of the details of the proper techniques of de-energizing a vehicle and then properly removing the battery from each unique vehicle is a challenge. You can get a list of some manufacturers, some you can't. In the US, there's a first responders type guide to how to de-energize the vehicles. And the automotive recycling industry has embraced that. In the United States, ARA, the association, has actually hired a third party to build a training module that would be specific to your make and model of each vehicle you're dismantling. So you could go in, put in your make model, and it would tell you through the steps of how to disable and dismantle that vehicle. It's still a little ways out from what I'm hearing, that it's not ready to be released to the market yet, but we're having to build our own tools in order to even, when I say tools, databases of how to handle these vehicles and how to handle them safely, to keep the employees safe during that process, and to keep the structure safe. When some of these components are even stored, we've learned that you can't be mixing chemistries across different battery types because of chemical reactions, and just trying to teach that to the industry has been a challenge. And the industry itself being fragmented, we talked about that earlier. Somebody mentioned it about the different professional levels, and they range from 1 or 2 employees doing stuff very crude to hundreds of employees, and they're tasked with doing the exact right thing to just stay safe. And getting the education to these guys, getting the training to them, it can be a challenge. And that's part of our goal is to educate the recyclers as much as we possibly can to keep them safe and to remove liability from them, whether it's on selling airbags or on selling batteries or dismantling and pulling batteries out of vehicles or whatever it may be.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Okay, so back to Takata for a second. Last week, Channel 9 had that story on, a bit of what they call a loophole with regard to traceability of airbags that potentially have been sold from donor vehicles that are on the recall list and put into recipient vehicles that potentially are not, or as Shane said before, maybe have been completed before, and now they've got an affected airbag in them again. Chad, can I throw over to you and ask you a little bit about, from an auto recalls perspective, what we've been doing? We've been working closely with Derek over at Subaru and others about, finding, tracing sold airbags and having that information provided back from the recycler so that Subaru and other manufacturers that are taking this on can actually trace that product more effectively. Do you want to talk to us about what we call our airbag or recall airbag contact tracing piece?
Absolutely. What we have found is that, we run a list of VINs from a recycler and identify that, you've got, 50 affected airbags that you have touched, that you could possibly have that you could have crushed or sold or you still have in stock. And it's coming back and it's like, man, I sold that airbag before the recall ever occurred. I didn't even realize there was a recall on it. It was sold, within just a few weeks of me buying it. And then the recall occurred, a year later when this recall became active. And now that airbag is out there. Well, what we've been able to do is actually gather the information from that buyer. And so the buyer that bought that airbag, a secondhand airbag, is now being entered into our system, and the invoice from the salvage yard or recycler where that airbag was sold on to another buyer is being provided to us. And then we're providing that back to the manufacturers, and the manufacturers are then chasing those sold airbags that may be in a different vehicle. And so we call it contact tracing. It's sort of like what's going on with COVID right now. And we're identifying, we've even found a few that have been one salvage yard sold to another salvage yard who sold it to another buyer. And so multi-step approach to identifying exactly where that bag is. And we're capable of drilling down and finding that now. And so that's a tool that we're providing for most of these guys that are on this call. And it's proved very valuable to help them reach their goal of 100% compliance.
And I think before I hand over to the manufacturers again to sort of have a bit of chat about that aspect of it, the automotive recycling industry is somewhat of an afterthought a lot of the times. So you look at, for example, regulations, or if you even look at the Takata recall, for example, and the mandatory recall, often either the advice received or the interaction with the industry was either ill-guided potentially, and therefore understanding how the industry works and what it does or doesn't do is really important in order to determine what the best path, what the best approach is. So we're finding that by deploying these types of tools, it will enable both manufacturers and recyclers to deal with recall parts better, be compliant, manage that risk better. But most importantly, at the end of the day, what every one of you said in your intros this morning was about consumer safety. And the only way to ensure that is to have a mechanism which is easy to use, which is efficient to use, which is aggregated in my view so that they don't have to go to website A, B, C, D, depending on which manufacturer vehicle it is, and that automatically drives that information to the hands of, in this case, the recyclers, so that they can deal with what they've got to deal with. From a contact tracing perspective, whether it's an airbag or a control arm or an ignition switch, it's irrelevant. At the end of the day, if it has been sold in the past or has been sold while it's been under recall, let's find a mechanism by which we can identify, trace that product back, and help you as manufacturers find and deal with it. So I think they're critical things that are becoming more and more clear to us. And again, both in Australia and in the UK, where we've launched the All Auto Recall service, we're seeing that that is a really, really critical part of the way forward. So, Jerome, e-tron, you've got the marketing in the background there. You've done a great job of marketing. So there's a whole heap of people on Facebook at the minute that are seeing that advertisement free of charge. Well done. Tell us a little bit about e-tron. And I know that we were, when I was up there once, you said one of the areas that you need to look at is how we can deal with electric vehicles better and electric batteries, because, you know, the disposal of those is something that needs to be considered moving forward as you get more product coming through. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I think the e-tron, there's two aspects to it. To me, there's the aspect of, firstly, acting safely and doing the thing safely for both the first responders, so either the fire brigade, the towing, but also there's aspect of what do we do after with those vehicles when they get into the recycler. And I totally agree earlier when there was, I think, Chad, when you said, how do we dismantle those cars? What do we do with those cars? I think for us, it's one of the major training that we're pushing out to our dealers at the moment is not all our dealers can work on those cars. So that's where the training is so specific that you'll find that in Australia currently, there will be only 7 dealers that are trained to sell and work on those cars with a high voltage. Because it's, again, a risk for anyone touching those cars. And if there is no education about it, it's something that's going to create some problems, but at the same time, it could be a real danger for the people touching those cars. So we've got a first responder manual. We've shared that with the fire brigades. We share that with the toy company. We probably need to share it with auto recyclers. We don't have a dismantle manual. I heard, Chad, that you were putting together a dismantling manual. Unfortunately, from our side, we haven't got to that stage yet of the dismantling, but we've got instructions regarding what we need to do or not do when you approach one of those cars. And I think that's one of the aspect that we all need to look at is, if I'm not educated on a high voltage vehicle, doesn't matter if it's an Audi, if it's a Jaguar, or if it's any other electric vehicle, people should know that if they don't have that education, they should not be touching those cars, because there is a very high danger for people putting their hand on those cars. And I think that education is to be, if I don't have that information, I need to go to the source and get that information. Manufacturers, yes, we do have that information. We share that information. That information is available. And again, that's something that's put available. There is a website where we can get around the world where people can subscribe to and get the information about repair instructions. We made them available. That was one of the requirements when we spoke to the FCAI, saying, hey, repair instructions are not things that we keep for ourselves. There is a source that's required. Again, we want people that are specialists to go into that information. And yes, people can go into those websites and purchase information, purchase instructions. So there is an information. The thing is, to me also, is what is the level of training that everyone requires? Don't forget, like I said, we've got dealers that are specialized into e-tron or electric vehicle, but not every single staff within that business is a high voltage technician. There'll be 1 or 2 high voltage technicians. Maybe there's a need for the auto recycling industry to start thinking about that education. And Chad, you mentioned earlier that there is maybe a training that's required. The problem with that is, I think that whilst we all talk about battery electric vehicle, every manufacturer is coming with a different technology with a battery electric vehicle. So there is the one that sits at the top here that says it's an electric vehicle, but the technology used for the electric vehicle is different. And that's why I think that that training will have to be very broad to start with. And when it comes to a specific, people will have to refer back to the manufacturer.
That's a really, really interesting point. You mentioned there's 7 dealerships and only specific people within those dealerships are going to be able to handle your electric vehicles. Yet from an automotive recycling perspective, these electric vehicles, obviously not the e-trons yet because you haven't got them out, but other electric vehicles that have been out in the marketplace for a long time, which would have similar challenges, you know, and sort of risks associated with the handling of them, are sold at auction every day, all day, and purchased by whomever wishes to purchase those. And let's face it, they're probably not handled right. So there's a few areas. I think that the certification program in the UK that the VRA is rolling out is possibly a solution to something like that. And basically that's the Vehicle Recyclers Association there is rolling out a set of standards that recyclers need to meet. And possibly, in my view, where it'll end up in a couple of years is that those that have had electric vehicle training to handle Audi e-trons, for example, or, you know, Mazda, when Mazda brings out their electric vehicle or whatever the case is, or the F-Pace, they'll be able to purchase those vehicles because they're seriously dangerous cars. I mean, it's not something to be sneezed at. They need to be handled appropriately. So really, really important. Matt, from an F-Pace perspective, obviously it's been out for a couple of years now, I think. Is that a similar situation where you've only got certain dealers and technicians that are able to handle those, or is it a little bit different from your perspective?
No, much like Audi, all of our retailers are trained on the I-Paces. However, there are varying degrees of accreditation. So we've got 4 levels of accreditation. And the bare minimum is you need to be what we call an informed person. So you are aware that this is a Jaguar I-Pace, and the high voltage components within this vehicle have the ability to seriously injure or kill if not handled correctly. And then we progressively step through different phases of repair processes on the vehicles. General service work is okay for most technicians, but when you get to the nitty-gritty and the real sort of high voltage components, there are only a select few technicians within the network that have the ability to power these vehicles down and even go a step further and fully repair individual cells within the battery. So there are varying degrees of competency, and it's quite a rigorous training regime that we go through. However, like Jerome mentioned, we also have a first responder information booklet that's been issued to the emergency services in terms of identifying high voltage components, in terms of your orange high voltage cables, how to safely disable that high voltage circuit in the event of an accident or potential safety risk to a consumer. So that's all been set out. I'd also like to state that we do need to come to some form of agreement where we can have a broad training regime for all parties involved to be able to identify these and safely manage and handle these vehicles. We need to account for the fact that these vehicles aren't going to always be within warranty. They will filter out of the networks, and other people will be able to get their hands on these cars and conduct works on them. So the safety component behind that and being able to distribute that information is paramount. And I think as an industry, as we start to move more and more towards these electric vehicles, I think we'll start to see the Australian standards are becoming aligned, and then there will be some form of information that can be distributed to say, look, if you identify these orange cables, they are high voltage, don't touch X or Y until you're fully understood. Reach out to the manufacturer, who will be able to issue you information or obtain workshop manual sort of details on how to safely navigate your way through this product.
Yeah, I think the critical points. The question I have that comes to mind is, how do we as an automotive recycling industry access that type of training? Is there something that this session, if I can trigger within? Obviously, it has to be done at an individual brand level initially, but then potentially as an aggregated piece. How can we access some of that training for recycling members across Australia and New Zealand? Or, we've got people on from the US, we've got people on from New Zealand, other people on, I'm just looking at Facebook at the minute, we've got Japanese members on, we've got specialists in the battery world, in fact, that are are on, and others that are doing a lot of recovery of airbags in the US through the Razor business over there. So there's a lot of people listening in different parts of the world. Obviously, we're talking from an Australian perspective here. What do we do? How do we start something? How do we get this movement towards training of an automotive recycler so that they and their people are kept safe, but also the storage, the distribution of this product, the recovery of end-of-life batteries? You know, what do we do with the damaged battery that's at a collision shop and is replaced by either a reclaimed original part or by a new one? How do we deal with those?
Yeah, obviously this is new technology to everyone, and it's something that we do need to align on, and the comments made are completely understandable. We do offer subscriptions to our workshop information and things like that. However, more importantly, it's the training aspect that we need to address. It's all well and good to be able to read a piece of paper and say you need to do A, B, C in a set order. However, to be able to disseminate that information in perhaps a face-to-face environment will really drive home those safety critical issues and really drive home the ability or inability for certain people to be able to do certain repairs or disassemblies. And that's something that we are looking into on how best to approach currently.
Chris, I think you're muted, Chris.
Sorry, someone knocked on the front door. The dog started going crazy, so I muted myself. Apologies for that. It's probably Amazon again. Anyways, so what I was saying is that I think it's really, really critical that this type of discussion continues, not only for the Australian market, but for the global automotive recycling industry, but also for the global vehicle manufacturer industry. I think end-of-life vehicles and what happens to that vehicle at its end of life and its components are critical. So again, we talk about traceability, how we can use information that you have, how we can use information that the automotive recycler has, that an insurer has, that the auction houses have, or whatever the case is, to actually take that vehicle down the right path so that it's dealt with appropriately and safely, I think is going to become more and more important. And those traceability tools, I think, are going to be critical. So we've got a question here from Emil. Hi, Chris, do you happen to know the total number of vehicles auto recyclers in Australia procure annually? Also, how many years of inventory do recyclers in Australia typically keep in stock? Or to phrase it another way, how quick is a recycler's turnover? Thanks, Emil. Tricky question. There's a lot of questions in one there. So how many do Australian automotive recyclers procure annually? We don't have the exact number, but if we're going to guesstimate what that number is, I would suggest it to be close to the 500,000 vehicles a year across the automotive recycling industry. So there's a lot of vehicles going into that industry every year. How many years worth of inventory? It depends. There are different business models that automotive recyclers have. Some of those business models I've been to some recyclers, very advanced recyclers that would hold inventory for 10 years. Now you're going to say, hold on, how can they be advanced and have that old inventory on their shelves? They buy late model, niche type product. For example, it might be a Mercedes or a BMW or an Audi product that is, 2018, still under warranty, very expensive type of product. They hold it for a good period of time. They catalog it very, very well with part numbers and interchange numbers, all very well cataloged. And that product turns a lot slower. Then you've got, on the flip side, you've got, others that do a lot of export, and it's really, they don't hold any inventory. It comes in and it's out within half an hour because they rip the bits off that they want to rip off, and bang, it's in a container and going overseas. So in both environments, there are challenges when it comes to, if we can bring the discussion back to recalls, there are challenges with both of those environments. In the first instance, for those that hold inventory for a long time, that inventory could be on the shelf, and at the point of inventory, there is no recall on it. But in 3 years' time, for example, one of the parts that they're holding may have had a recall activated. In the case of Takata, that's probably going back, if you look at the Nardi ones, nearly back to 95. So it can happen. Now, again, we need to provide solutions for that, and Chad can talk to some of the recall solutions that we're providing with auto recalls with the auto alerts, but there's some of the key challenges for that type of a business. On the flip side, for those that turn the inventory very quickly, then the contact tracing is really important, right? Because it may not be affected at the time of inventory, and if it is affected later on down the track, they need to be able to communicate to the person that purchased that inventory or that stock and let them know that that part has now been recalled so they can have it dealt with. Otherwise, we've got parts flying around the marketplace that have been recalled and no one knows about them. So that's the critical component there, Emil. Hopefully that answers your question, Emil. Any more questions either on Facebook? We've got a heap of people on Facebook at the minute. Please ask the questions. We'll try and attend to them, or on the Zoom call, please jump on and ask some of those questions. Okay, so we've talked about the Takata piece. I think it's critical. We are coming up to the last 4 months of the Takata recall, or the ACCC mandatory recall. One of the questions I've had from a number of recyclers, guys, and I probably can't really answer that question properly because probably no one can, but what happens after December 31st, 2020 with regard to Takata? Derek, you've been quiet.
You're right. We've been asking the same questions to ACCC to figure out what actually happens. And from my experience from audit, what we have seen is that whoever had the last contact of this particular either VIN or airbag will be made accountable for it. Whether it be through, we have to give an account for every single VIN which is affected by a Takata airbag recall, and we have to give over our data saying, well, this is the last contact that we had with it, and we hand that information over to the ACCC. So when our audit gets done, and we have to give them the information saying, here are the outstandings, and here is the last point of contact we had for them. If it be a customer, we can say, well, the customer just said, I don't want it done, or we've tried this customer and we couldn't find them through every resource we could. Or it might be in the case of a salvage yard, we had the information of this at the salvage yard, and unfortunately we couldn't obtain the information. At that point, it is over to the ACCC to make a call on what they do with that information and how they follow it up. I can only imagine it would be a case of auditing each of those to find out why they didn't provide the information that was required of them. That's all from my experience so far. I'm not sure what everyone else thinks.
Shane, can I ask you, from your perspective, what does it look like post December 31st?
So there's two elements to the campaign. One is the coverage of the compulsory notice, which has an end date on it. So that's the element, and aligns very much with what Derek said. There'll be almost like a closeout piece that we provide with the ACCC. This is where we are at that point in time, and all our activity and actions that have been conducted in relation to the vehicles that are included within that that campaign. But beyond that, for MAZDA, and I can't speak for every other brand, the recall remains active until complete. So there's a number of elements that you can be considered to have completed all required actions under the compulsory notice, but without having actually repaired the vehicle. So the examples where a customer hasn't responded, or they've been, refusing to respond, those cars will still remain open in our system. And if they do present to a dealer, or we are able to engage with that customer, then we will continue to repair those vehicles. So that activity doesn't stop just because the compulsory notice stops.
And with regard to, you said that if they do present to a dealer, obviously a vehicle at an automotive recycling facility won't present to a dealer, it's off the road. What does it look like for the automotive recycling industry moving forward?
Well, our intention is to continue the activity that we're currently undertaking. So we've got no plan at this stage to stop that at December 31. So from a MAZDA perspective, we're planning to continue those actions.
Jerome, thanks, Shane. Jerome, from an Audi perspective, what happens at December 31? Sorry.
I think that will be there. I think very similar to Shane. I think from our perspective, we're still seeking clarification at the moment from the ACCC. What does it mean? Because I mean, whilst there's that deadline, we still have some. And like I said earlier, the safety of our customers is what we're focusing on. We're not focusing too much about is it a recall or not a recall. For us, it's more, hey, there's a safety issue. We need to address that safety issue, and that's where I was very interested earlier about your traceability, because for us, this is the important part. I think the traceability. Whilst we're doing the best we can to get to the customers, what we call active customers, so the ones that are driving their cars, we also do our best to address the non-active customers, and that's where sometimes I'm a bit shocked when I receive an information from you saying, look, Jerome, we've identified all those vehicles now in recyclers. However, we don't have a response from the recyclers. And to me, that's the thing that, as a manufacturer, and I think that's what I said earlier, they're our customers. They're not Audi customers only. They're now our customers. They're customers that you, as a recycler, have sold an airbag. We need to have that information as a manufacturer so we can try to trace where that airbag is, because that airbag is probably in another car. And we want to get to that customer. And that's where, to me, that the important part is, whilst, yes, it's important to think about what is after the 31st of December, is what can we do better to get to the 31st of December and be in the best position possible? And we've been provided by Auto Recall a list of auto recyclers that still haven't responded to your request. And as a brand, that's one thing that we're going to do in a few weeks. A few auto recyclers that haven't responded to you or haven't reacted to your request are going to get a notification from Audi Australia asking them formally to go back to you with that information, because we need to know. And to me, that's the important part, is we shouldn't neglect that there is a customer out there that could be driving with that airbag fitted to their cars. And that's why we want to focus on this. Look, what's going to happen after the 31st of December? Like I said, it's still quite vague. The recall will still be open in our system, so the recall will be active in our system. Yes, the requirement that we have under the compulsory recall will probably be not as stringent as they've been to now, but it is still important to get to those vehicles. And look, if it means for a recycler to give us the information where they've sold the airbag, because that airbag might be in a car that's still in circulation, we need to do something. If the airbag is still in the car sitting at a recycler, what I will say to the recycler is contact Auto Recall, get an airbag to them so they can return the airbag and we can scrap it. So that's what I would like to say.
To that point, Jerome, I think that's a really important point, and we are looking ahead a little bit. That is beyond December, but we do have 4 months left, and certainly been working closely with all of you guys on this call and others. And Derek's been pushing it really, really strongly. What can we do in the next 4 months? So if I can use the last 5 minutes of this call and talk about the next 4 months and press home to the automotive recyclers that are listening. No, the world isn't going to end at December 31. But certainly we're going to be in a position where between now and then we've got an opportunity to do what we need to do. Jerome mentioned then the audit that we've run through with Audi and all the other manufacturers, looking at the data that we've got so we can understand which recyclers have engaged so that they can actually get the information back, because they need to report it back to the ACCC. We've reached out to a number of recyclers. What can you do? It's simple. You would have received emails from Chad, from myself, from whoever, asking for information about the recalled airbags that we've identified. The simplest thing to do so that you can comply is actually get onto those and actually respond to them. And whether they've been crushed, whether they've been sold, with the system caters for all of that, right? You can upload your sold PDFs, etc. So whether they've been crushed or sold, or whether you've got them in stock, it's an opportunity now to actually deal with those airbags and have them returned. We know everyone's busy. Let's not go there. Everyone's busy. It's not a matter of, trying to get you to do something that isn't important, but, we'd like you to do. It's critical. So we urge you, and I think each of the manufacturers on the call here today and the others that weren't able to make it are saying, please attend to those, respond to it, look at them, spend a day, half a day, an hour, whatever it is that it's going to take you, depending on the volume that you've got, and actually come back to us with the information so we can provide to the manufacturers. Manufacturers are paying for it, for your time and effort, not for the actual airbag, because it's a recalled part, but they're paying for the time and effort to help you make it possible. So I think if from an all auto recalls perspective and Chad's perspective, if I can just say, you've got the information, we've done all the hard work, it's just a matter of now putting in a little bit of time and saying, this is where it's at, right? I think that's going to be critical. So we've got 3 minutes left. If I can hand over to each of you for some closing comments on the next 4 months and what you'd like to see potentially, I'll hand over. So Murray, can I just sort of hand it over to you for a second?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm not involved in the management side at all, but from the call team side, we're just going flat out to try and contact as many people as we can, encourage them to call us back, encourage them to get their vehicles repaired, or if they don't have the vehicles anymore, then to provide information that verifies what happened to it. A lot of them are just saying that it was in an accident 3 years ago and they don't know where it went, it wasn't insured, blah, blah, blah. So we're just working as hard as we can to try and track those down. And then I think after that, it'll be sort of up to the feedback from the ACCC on where we go from there.
Excellent. Thanks, Murray. Matt, the last 4 months, the last stretch.
Last 4 months, rapidly trying to track down the handful of cars that we've got remaining. Obviously, we want to work cooperatively and in line with all stakeholders, consumers, retailers, recyclers. We just want to get to the very last one of these airbags, ensure our consumer safety is there. If we tick all our boxes by December 31, but we still haven't recovered 100%, we don't stop there. We'll keep moving forward until we replace every single one out there.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Derek.
Yeah, I would say the same that Matt said, that completely, that we will continue to find, our responsibility as manufacturers to find these regardless. So that date is a date it's mandated by ACCC, but for our customers, we'll keep on trying to find them. But I just implore salvage yards to help us, to help you, to get you paid for your time, get it out of your stock and done with, and that way we can move forward. But I think you're right that we need to work together to get the result we all need. So I appreciate everyone's time today.
Great. Thanks, Derek. Shane?
Very similar message to the other team members. We encourage everyone to remove the risk that associates with these inflators, first of all for consumers, but also for the recycling industry, because there is a risk attached if they do end up out there in a customer vehicle, and they have gone through the channel at any stage. So while it remains a focus of the compulsory notice, we've probably got our best opportunity to encourage people to engage, and we really should take advantage of that.
Great, thanks, Shane. Jerome.
Thanks for that. And again, from my side, I think a big thank you to all of you and all the recyclers, because I think that we've been doing a fantastic job for the last 18 months. What I will ask is, for the next 4 months, let's put a bit more effort and let's try to get all those airbags out of circulation. Let's try to finalise our recall so we don't ask the question, what's happening after the 31st of December? If all of us are working in the same goal, is trying to achieve 100% and try to recover all those airbags, I don't think we need to talk about it after the 31st. And that's where I think we need a big help from all of you. I think we've been working really well together. Like I said earlier, yeah, maybe there is a little minority that we're still chasing at the moment that haven't responded to you. Hopefully after this call, they will respond to you and get back to us. But to me, I would like to see the positive side where we actually all work together and we all achieve that goal of finalising that recall.
Great, Jerome. Thank you. Chad, before we finish up, some last comments from you?
If you're a recycler and I have sent you an email asking for information, please respond. We are trying desperately to find and resolve every one of these airbags that these manufacturers have asked us to resolve. It's imperative we make it happen as soon as possible to get these things out of the market.
Excellent. Thanks, Chad. Well, to close off this session, if I can just take a quick minute to thank everyone. You know, the automotive recycling industry for years has wanted to engage with the vehicle manufacturing industry in a more meaningful way. You know, you could say that it's taking a quite sort of unfortunate recall in the Takata recall to bring us closer together, and I think it's really important. I think Matt and Jerome, with regard to the electric vehicles and the type of training there, you've opened up an opportunity there potentially where we can work closer and actually look at some of these challenges that the industry has, not as, you know, segments, but as a collective. The automotive recycling industry, I think, is a critical component of the automotive broader industry, especially moving into, you know, the next 5 or 10 years. We're going to have some challenges economically. People are going to be holding their cars longer. People are going to be looking to repair their vehicles. We've already seen increases, significant increases in automotive recycled parts sales. So there's no doubt that people are going to be looking to buy the automotive recycled part more and more. So, you know, we need to make sure that we work together to keep the consumer safe, to make sure that recalls are tracked, traced, and we can actually determine where a part is, even if it's been sold from an automotive recycler in the future. So on behalf of the podcast, thank you to all the guys that are on the call today. Thanks for everyone for jumping on. We got a heap of people that were on Facebook today, so thank you very much. Hopefully you found the session meaningful and you got some information there. For those that haven't engaged from a recalls perspective, jump on, return Chad's emails, get onto him, get onto me, whatever the case is, or whoever you need to get onto. Do what you got to do with recalls, keep your customers safe and keep yourself safe as well, because you don't want anything going wrong with one of these parts. So again, thanks very much, everyone. And hopefully everyone has a nice rest of Wednesday and rest of the week. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.